It's really good to see you.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
so good to see
Oh my
you.
God, I'm tired of seeing you on a screen.
I know.
You know?
I can't. It's astonishing, and that I feel so connected to you. But like this is like we're finally
Yeah.
meeting, and so I was stoked that it all worked out. That you came down, and
Yeah. Why aren't we neighbors? That's the thing. You know?
yeah,
I
God,
really just would. Yeah.
I
So
know.
anyway, thank you.
I know. It's I've been such a fan of all of the stuff that you've kind of been able to culminate and lay out all the while in all the books, but this book in particular, I don't have a word for how almost eloquent it is, and almost like when you were like, I'm astonished by the environment all the time. I'm astonished by life. But reading this book, it was just like like every sentence seemed to just blow my mind. Like even from I have intimate experiences with baobab tree, right? And you
Right.
called that out, and just like how just extraordinary this life is, and you almost took a movie that you want to see, and you put it in your wordology, the way you describe things. It just was so touching and factitious as well. Like there's so many amazing facts, but when you're weaving all of those together, and then I think that the thing that you captured, it was like the elephant in the room of the world, which is carbon, right? It is like literally the fabric of creation, and no one's really talking about it.
Yeah.
Which was like, what? So what was that, before we get into all that, like what was that moment for you? It might have been, I don't know, years ago or whatever, but that moment of like, oh, it's carbon.
It's a really good question. And I'm not saying that in a gratuitous way, by the way. I mean, what was that path for me, and I'll go back a little ways just to describe it fully, but in 1987, is it? Bill McKibben wrote End of Nature, and that was to me the book to this day, which is, I had a teacher once said, read the book that saves you from reading 10 other books. It's read the source book, and that's the source book to this day. And it wasn't about climate, it was about climate. The title is The End of Nature. In other words, he actually saw very clearly and described wonderfully that connection between the atmosphere and the biosphere. And that has been lost in the climate movement. And the climate narrative has been about carbon being a thing, an element. It is an element, of course, but as if it's the bad boy, the culprit, something we got to get rid of, something we have to sequester, something we have to capture, carbon capture. Right. Like as if we could fix this civilization with some technologies and practices that would allow us to continue to go on the way we're living now on the earth. And I'm part of that in a way, because when I wrote Drawdown I started in 2013, but in 2017, there was no really reliable or complete or even numerous list of solutions, what people could do. People wanted to know what to do, and they couldn't find out. I mean, there was like little websites and things, and like put a power strip in your home entertainment center and wash with cold water, things like that.
Right.
I'm like, really? But when I wrote Drawdown, and I gathered scientists from all over the world to really research the solutions, to make sure that they had their feet on the ground, and calculate actually what the impact of those solutions would be going out to 2050, because that's what the That's what the book was about. But I knew then, Darin, that I wanted that the book that should follow would be regeneration. I knew that before I even set pen to paper on Drawdown. And the reason is because I knew even then we were sort of isolating the problem, the carbon. Let's bring it back home. Let's stop putting it up there, and then as if everything's going to be Jake, everything will be cool if we get there. Net zero, 2050. That was the whole thing, right?
Right.
But underneath that, there's a subtext which isn't really talked about, which is that we are destroying the living world, and the implication of a net zero point in time is that, okay, we can just relax now, and it's not going to get hotter, and maybe we'll even go the other way instead of net zero, sub-zero, and that's just not true, because we are destroying the living world to live the way we live, even if we do it so-called quote quote carbon neutrally, which is not possible, by the way, physically. And so that's why I did regeneration, which is like the path through is to create more life. And there is no other path. That's it. I mean, you can take all the solutions and put them in a big mountain, and there's only one way through where we are today, is to create more life on Earth on every level, whether it's for children or whether it's for migrants or whether it's for forest and for the sea, the creatures, insects, everything. We have to create more life, on this planet, because we've been taking it for 500 years, without exception, without pause. We've been extracting. Everybody knows that. But the implication of the climate narrative is if we get carbon right, then we can continue to live the way we are? Right. Like, question mark? And that seemed just like it's absurd. But rather than cast aspersions, on the narrative, the narrative I will, but not in people or organizations. I do not. I really appreciate what people are doing. But if we're not looking at the whole picture, and part of the problem was that we had objectified carbon as a thing, and that, carbon neutral, decarbonization, all these things that actually for most people left them cold. Like, okay, if you think so, if you want to do it, and you know how to do it. I have a job, I have a family, I have a school, I'm in college, I'm in, whatever, I'm poor, it didn't mean anything to almost 99+% of the people in the world.
You and I have had that conversation.
Yeah, it didn't mean a thing.
Right.
And so I wanted to write a book which was not about, we're screwed, what are we going to do about it? I wanted to write a book saying, do we actually even understand what carbon is? And carbon can't be seen as a thing. It's a very male combat, tackle, fight, all that sort of stuff, fix it. We're men, we know what that's like. It's good to be capable of fixing things, nothing wrong with that. I'm not decrying that. But the idea that you're going to fix the planet by focusing on one element, it was silly, because carbon should be seen as a flow. Yeah. It does not exist by itself somewhere where you can manipulate it and do that and so forth. You can manipulate life, you can kill it, you can create the conditions for more life, but not as an element. And so when we understand carbon is and people say it's the basis of life, well, it's a lot more than basis. It is life. Right. It's the only element, that in change, has memory and can store energy. No other element can do that. That's why it's the basis for life and so forth. And what's interesting is that we just were ignorant of it. And people say, well, okay, carbon. There's 1.2 trillion carbon atoms in every cell of your body. And you have 34 trillion cells. The math is ridiculous. But the point being is that what's it doing in there? Oh, it's the maestro of the chemistry set that is your cell. Without that, there's nothing going on in the cell. Nothing. And so, and yet in the cell, it is a chemistry experiment, if you will, experiment or process. It's not alive. It's chemistry. The cell is alive, for sure. No question, with sensors. And cells talk to each other. I mean, people say, oh, that's the wrong verb. Okay, whatever verb you prefer, but they're communicating, and eukaryotic cells, and they like to be together, and they like to clump, and make other things, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and so forth. And that's all the creatures and plants and extraordinary life forms on the planet today, coming from those cells. And we can't explain why these really 10 trillion atoms in a single human cell, are alive when you have a sensor around it and encapsulated in a cell itself. How did that become life? Well, that's just one of the miracles. And it's like the book for me about carbon, it's just about, we have no idea where we live and how it works. And I'm not gainsaying science and what it does know. I'm just saying, in a larger sense, we're just not aware of it. And we should be revering carbon, not, decarbonizing. We should be re-carbonizing this planet, right? That's what we need to do, is bring life, let's bring it back home, but to what end? To, direct our capture, to put it in, liquefy it and pump it in pipes down into the ground? No, So carbon is really about discovery, the things that you talked about, like, looking at a fact or, an anecdote or a description and going, who knew? And for me, it was the same thing, which is I knew that intuitively, I knew that in a sense experientially, spending most of my life outdoors, but I didn't know the data, I didn't know the facts, I didn't know the science. And I think we're at a threshold in the United States and in the world as a whole, where the old science, which is very empirical and separative and naming things, and this is how it works, but, not really holistic at all, and traditional ecological knowledge from, indigenous cultures around the world are merging. And what we're discovering is what we don't know.
Right.
We're discovering mystery that's scientifically validated, as opposed to, I know, you don't, listen up. Well, that hasn't really worked. And now it's like, I'm in awe. What do you see? Like, wow, that's amazing.
Right.
Okay, now who are we going to be? Who are we going to be within that context?
Yeah. There's so much there, because on the one hand, it is the architecture of this entire, and that's astonishing. The architecture of everything that's created in this world is carbon-based. It's not alive, but it's animated through this mystery. And it also, it throws me into this, when I was a fly on the wall, when we were in the Great Barrier Reef shooting Down to Earth, the second season. So we're on the platform in the Great Barrier, and there was a science team and Aboriginal people, and they would meet all the time. And the scientists, out of their mouth, like, we were just sitting there, like, I didn't have questions. We just sparked it and let them talk. That was the first time I saw both of those people working together. And they said, without a doubt, the knowledge that they brought to us accelerated our knowledge exponentially in what we knew about the barrier, what we knew about the ocean. That alone. So we're sitting in this room describing this very thing. If we're closed off to, if we're just thinking of science and reductionism and it's this name and that name, without this almost 50,000 years of indigenous knowledge of the mystery, when they don't have words for some of the things that we do, but they have the knowledge within them, it is, and like, to your point, we can't solve the problem within the fishbowl, right? Like, okay, there's nothing wrong with the technology. There's nothing wrong with all of the stuff that's innovating.
Right.
But I think how you weave all of this together is you're weaving the extraordinary, right? And at the same time, how do we then take that extraordinary and kind of be humble and go back to acknowledging this balance? Because that's what I think you're also stating clearly in the book, in the sense like, it's not good, it's not bad. It is. There's an isness to carbon. And if you create more of it by the pollutive nature of the way we're living, it just throws off the balance, plain and simple. Right? The ecosphere and our bodies, we're constantly carbon exchanging all the time. But all of a sudden, our human greed of wanting what we want, we've just thrown off this balance to such a degree. Yes, it shows up in readings, but then it's really about how do we move forward, acknowledging this wonder and acknowledging the balance, and what you're really poking at is like, how do we develop a society that is acknowledging this incredible mystery, and at the same time, like, how do you kind of, it's almost like the more I read, the more I'm blown away and kind of humbled of what you said and how you were laying out, but then how do you rectify society? And at the same time, it's great. Some of these advancements are great, and they're in little labs, and we're creating a bunch of new stuff and getting out of some of the, destructive behaviors. So it's almost like it's this. I mean, my brain goes now to like, okay, now what? Like what?
Well, yeah. I mean, your description on the Barrier Reef is a really perfect one, because you had Western science, not scientists, but Western science, and then you had indigenous, traditional knowledge, ecological knowledge. And okay, what's the difference in them? The difference from the Enlightenment, the Western science emerged from that, was basically naming. It was like identifying and naming. Right. And then analyzing and testing and experimenting with what was named. Naming is about separation. It's about making a distinction. This is a this and this not a that. I'm going to check out what this is doing. Okay. And so we have really 1 billion papers out there about, how the world works. Okay. Published papers, maybe not 1 billion, but I mean hundreds of millions of them. Okay. So you're standing there in an indigenous culture that has been there at least 50,000, some say now over 100,000 years. Okay, but whether it's 20,000, 50,000, whatever, that is observational science.
Right.
Okay, and their science and their language is not about nouns. English is about nouns, as is German and French, but English particularly, the biggest language in the world, besides Spanish, and it's a noun thing. Okay. Indigenous language is about verbs. In other words, it's about relationship, because to live on the land where you are, you need to know where you lived and how it worked. And that's from observation. And this happens and this happens. The song lines, the famous song lines where, the Aboriginals used to traverse, Australia from where they were and all the way to the Pacific Ocean, were descriptions of places. And when you got there, at what time, what would be available to you in terms of foodstuffs and things that you could dig in, roots and animals and this and that and so forth. Those are song lines, and also gave you the direction, And so again, it's observational science passed on, developed, refined, over many, many, many years, obviously, centuries. And so when you put those together, then you have something that's really remarkable, because there's nothing wrong with Western science. It's what's concerning about it is that it teaches us that the world is disconnected without intending to do that. It does. Yeah. And observational science teaches you how intricately and beautifully and mysteriously it is connected. For an indigenous person, or any person that wanted to live within the confines, the constraints of where they were, in the desert, in the mountains, in the forest, on an island, they didn't have any externalities coming in. Nothing was being imported. Nothing was being exported. So they had to understand it as a system. We do not understand the Earth as a complex adaptive system, And because of that, what emerged from that, when the science of global warming sort of emerged, actually from 1850, but it was really the 1960s, 70s, where it really became emerged into the public sphere. We used our knowledge and our capabilities and how we saw the world as a way to focus on it. We focused on it as a thing. We objectified it, and it's an object. It's climate. There's a climate crisis. By the way, there's no such thing. The climate cannot have a crisis, with all due respect. And furthermore, climate is just an expression of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is expression of the biosphere. They're inseparable, just like your lungs and the gases in your lungs are inseparable from your toe. But we don't. We see the body as one thing, but we see the earth as different parts. Wrong. Gong. Not true. And so when you live, oddly enough, within a certain part of the earth, you are then, you're developing knowledge that allows you to persist. They wouldn't have been there for 50, 60, 70,000 years if they didn't figure that one out, and so forth. And so we are in a culture that is actually self-terminating by our activity, by what we think, what we believe, but also by greed, hate, and delusion. All those things mixed together stir well, and you have basically a nightmarish future, and some nightmares right now for many people on Earth, okay? And so there is this moment, not a moment, but we're at a time where we need to come together and share what we know with people who have wisdom. It's not just about praxis. It's not just about technology. You have to have wisdom with it as well. Not just, I can do this and do that, and isn't that amazing? Okay, but where's the wisdom in all this? Where's the wisdom in our government? Where's the wisdom in our politics? Where's the wisdom in our corporations? And it's sadly absent. But if we're going to stay and persist and endure and develop as a species, we can't do it without it.
Yeah, and that's the it's something that you almost have to acknowledge that and almost fight against it, because the culture and our language keeps giving us the same thing, and again, our brains just want to reduce it down, and
Sure.
It's the CO2, it's the crisis, it's the thing, but it's so damn abstract. But when you put things together and you acknowledge it from this, I guess, this greater, and you're using, I guess maybe carbon as the muse, right, to explain that this beyond intimate exchange of all of life has these center points at it, and this extraordinary. I go back to balance. It's all, but the way we are expressing ourselves. What is it? What are we? What do you say? 0.01%.
0.01% of creatures,
right?
In terms of mass, yeah.
And how much destructive reductionist behavior are we having? And you look at pollution, and people can get. That's where I like. From the abstract climate stuff, it's hard I was listening from my brother's perspective in Minnesota. Like, he's just like, well, okay, so that doesn't mean anything to me.
Right, that's right.
But it does mean something when you can go tend your soil, makes better plants. He grows those plants. He knows they don't have glyphosate and, all that stuff he doesn't use, so you're like, oh, and that's that. Then from that educational standpoint, he gains wisdom by the way he's like, that makes sense to me. That's innately sensical.
He's interacting with life processes.
Right.
Life is the teacher.
Right.
And if we override that, then there's a kind of hubris and arrogance because, oh, I can get more. Well, what's more?
Yeah.
You know, when I say the climate can have a crisis, I mean, there is a crisis. It is heating up and we are not adapted. And, you know, more water in the air and too little water. Bigger heating, too much cold.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, floods, droughts, fire, you know, all these things are a manifestation for sure of a heating planet. We're changing so quickly in terms of that relationship between the biosphere and the atmosphere. But it's a relationship. It's connected with the only species. There's roughly 8.45 million different species on Earth. There's 3.4 trillion of us. You know, I'm talking about insects and ants and, you know, copepods in the oceans and blue whales and, you know, fox and, you know, owl butterflies. I mean, there's 3.4 trillion creatures, and they're communicating every day, by the way. They're talking. They really are talking, and we know that now. Indigenous people would have told that, like, duh. We knew that a long time ago. We were listening.
Right.
You were actually extracting, taking, you know, and so forth. But that we're the only one of those 8.4 million that is dysregulating the climate.
Right.
None of the others are.
Right.
And they were born, emerged, developed, evolved as part of a system of life, you know, and those who didn't do well became extinct, okay? And those that did adapt are here today in different forms. They might have evolved in different shape, form, size, depending on, you know, ice ages or this or that. They're bigger, they're smaller, but they're here. And so we showed up, you know, with our bicameral brain, which is pretty amazing, you know. And so we're in a left brain era where, you know, which is very much about, you know, fixing things and about technology and separation and, you know, and it lacks the right side. We have no right side, which is really about wisdom and holistic and seeing relationships. We are the same inside our brain as what I'm describing outside in the world, you know, between sort of Western civilization, if we can call it civilization right now, and indigenous, you know, wisdom and knowledge, traditional knowledge. No traditional indigenous person would say they're wise. But no indigenous language had a word for nature either.
Which is wild.
And so we have nature-based solutions. I mean, I want to hit my forehead when I hear that guy.
Right.
Oh, what are you?
Right.
You're not nature? That is. And we have a nature-based solution.
It's over there.
And now they want to actually make it an asset class, BlackRock announced, you know, one of the biggest holdings of capital in the world, you know, BlackRock, that nature is the new asset. Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, the IMF says the blue whale's worth $2 million. Are you kidding me? Who did the math? And what does it mean?
Right.
And how could you possibly look at the living world with a dollar-denominated sign in front of it and numerically? It's like, so that is the problem. That people see the world that way, and they won't even solve it. No, if we actually assign value to nature, that somehow we're going to what? Sell offsets, sell nature's, you know, offsets. And underlying that is a basic fact, which is that settler colonist cultures, you know, from Europe have been basically capturing and selling off the living world to the highest bidder for 500 years. This is what it got us to. I'm not decrying the breakthroughs, the science, the technology, the brilliance, you know, I'm not there. But the market as a means to actually solve the situation we're in is, again, just like without sounding, well, I guess it's mockery, but without sounding superior, it's like, you have to be kidding.
Yeah.
Show me how the markets work so far in terms of the existential risk that we face right now in terms of nature, in terms of the living world.
It's actually offensive.
It is.
That you could give a dollar sign to a living creature.
Yeah. How about your children? Do you want them denominated in dollars too? I mean, they're a living creature.
Well, in a
Yeah.
sense, we're kind of doing it with our broken systems.
Yeah.
You know, our healthcare system or whatever that is. We've assigned commodity to our usage on social media, our time, our scrolling. All of that is got a number to it, and to how much it's going to cost to just do these destructive mechanisms to heal us from. You know, the only option you have is burn, cut, irradiate. Like it's the same. It's the same insanity.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, where we're really, I think, blind to is the greatest extractive industries in the world are Meta and Google,
Yeah.
because they're taking everything you do think and and express, and then translating it into something that you want to buy,
Right.
get, have, to show they somehow know, or algorithms, they don't know themselves and so forth, what it is that would get your dollars. And dollars for what, I mean, and then it's just compounding the extraction industry to sell, advertise, sell, advertise, sell, advertise. But that all comes from Insta, from Meta, from Google searches, now for AI searches and so forth, I mean, so every time you go there, basically, I mean, you have options sometimes and, in terms of whether your information is kept or not. But the fact is, it's an extractive industry as well, not just fossil fuels and things like that.
Yeah, because you just keep pull that string, and then there's a place where that data has to be stored. There's energy that will take, so it physicalizes itself. But we're so distant from it, we just think we're using AI.
Yeah.
Like it's distant. Everything's distant. Everything's away from us. Everything is cut off.
Yeah.
Right?
It's magical.
Yeah. But it always has this, like, to your point, it always has really a destructive end to that usage, because it hasn't taken that wisdom.
No, I mean, there's people like in this country, I don't know other countries, I'm sure it might be true, but, these big, huge data centers that they're building, and they have to be kept cool. That takes electricity, it takes noise, and there's communities in Arizona and other places. The noise is driving them literally crazy at night. It just is a buzz and a hum and a kind of frequency that is very disturbing. It's not just, the wind blowing and soughing through the trees. But we're building 1,500 new ones for the AI. And they're powered by, they say renewable, but there actually isn't enough renewable. They're powered by natural gas. And so we can do AI searches, which is, they're fabulous, don't get me wrong. I'm not, but again, to what end? To what end are we having a conversation? Like, where do we want to go?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, as a people, as a civilization, and that conversation doesn't exist except in bits and pieces and parts and so forth, So I'm not pessimistic. I don't want to sound like that. I'm just describing what is. Yeah.
Well, you're far from it, especially when you read the book. You put it in such a beautiful, poetic way with facts of describing the extraordinary, right? Describing the communication network of the plant life, the fungal kingdom, the we barely know, but just I mean, some of those stats around how a plant communicates versus us, and the networks and the different ways of communication, the different ways of interacting, and like the way you've put it out there, you can't help but just to be in awe. And that's what we've lost.
Well, the awe is that the more we understand, the more it points to mystery.
Right.
As opposed to, okay, I got it, I know, now what else? What else you got for me? And plants, and the relationship between plant, soil, and mycelia, that is to say, fungal networks, is so extraordinary what we're discovering. And every explanation or every discovery creates new sort of areas of inexplicable events and actions. So we're like, well, okay, it does this and this, and how?
Right.
In other words, we know what it does,
Right.
or its relationship. For example, I don't know why there's a professor anyway. He wanted to know how many roots were on a single seed of rye, which is a grass, you know.
Right.
You know,
This was
I
wild.
mean, we eat it in rye bread, but it's just a little nub. And anyway, it's 14 million roots. Okay, now 4 million are
I had to
hair.
read that twice.
Yeah, 14 million roots. 4 million are hair roots. So let's
Just pulling up carefully, and they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see them. You do it in an electron microscope, though. Each of those roots is connected to hyphae. It has a hyphae at the tip, which is connected to mycelia. So mycelia, this vast fungal network in healthy soil, okay?
Right.
Not in dead soil. And basically, it lives and it needs sugar or glucose, or, it needs glycogen or whatever, and it gets it from plants. It gets it from the roots of plants. All right. The plants generally take 30% of the carbohydrate that they're creating out of basically CO2 and light, sunshine, photons.
Important.
and 30% approximately goes down into the roots. Okay, and why? Well, the bacteria and the mycelia, basically, that's their food. So the plant is feeding these things. Why? Because they get something back. From the bacteria, they get enzymatic breakdown of minerals. They can get minerals, okay, that are bioavailable. It's like, here's some sugar. You guys go do your work. I'm, making a cartoon, but that's what's happening. Mycelia, on the other hand, are even more sophisticated than bacteria in the sense that these are vast networks, unbelievably numerous in terms, and you can't even see them. And, they're so thin, they're 2 cells thick, but they actually are providing with the plant with nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or selenium or zinc and so forth. Usually nitrogen and phosphorus is what plants want the most of. They're short on it. And it is swapping. In other words, it's a trade. The plant roots, these 10 million, are saying, we need, or I need, or this is what I want. Somehow that information is being conveyed to the mycelia. Let's say it's phosphorus. That mycelia in that area doesn't really have it. It will then communicate to other parts of the mycelial network that do have it. And it'll come in. You can see it moving in. Now we can see it in video. The work that Toby Kears has done at the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks and in Amsterdam, and it's coming in. You look at these vesicles or these tubes or mycelia, and stuff is moving in 2 directions at the same time. This is going there and this is going there, And so the question is, how do they know? What's the communication? There's no brain there. There's no neurons. There's no... We know that mycelia, from the work of Adamaski at the Royal Society in London, have a clicking sound. Just like the San people in Botswana or Wales, actually.
I was like, it's so interesting. I was like, click.
Yeah, clicking.
It's actually a click.
And we can record, and there's recordings of it. But what he noticed is that certain, like Morse code, like certain clicks group and repeat themselves. And he thought, well, that's kind of like a word. No, it's a combination of sounds that makes meaning, to other mycelia or to the plant. And then he noticed that these things were in series, that there would be like 7 or 8 or 10 that would be in series, and that would happen. And he started to call those sentences. Okay, now, he got into a lot of trouble with other mycologists who said, oh, that's BS and so forth. Let's step aside from whether he's right or wrong. Okay, let's not. We're not. I don't have the knowledge to enter into that debate. But the fact is that the data are correct. The interpretation of the data is what's suspect. But the fact,
so he might have been jumping to steps because he wanted it to be sentences and real communication in the way that he can understand it.
But they're doing some down there, and they're clicking away and in patterns and rhythms.
There is an organization of that communication.
And somehow when this plant over there says, I want phosphorus and it's over someplace else, there is a communication system that then metabolizes that phosphorus and brings it over to the plant that's demanding it. So it's like a marketplace, like it's farmer's market.
Right.
I brought my oranges and lemons and you got spinach and chard, let's swap.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what's going on underneath, but in such extraordinary minutia. If you have 10 million roots on the rye seed, well, what's a lawn doing? I mean, what's a field of crops? When you look at the vast, number of plants, that are on the earth, on land and so forth, and that's happening, except where the living soil has been destroyed by chemical agriculture, then you don't get that interaction. Yeah.
I could imagine if there is any communication, it's screaming. Right?
Well,
because it's lacking. It's like I am lacking all of this and I'm being poisoned. What are you saying now?
It's really disappearance. And so not me, but I mean, scientists all over the world have been recording sound of soil. And they stick these really, really delicate little probes in soil and into soils that are like in biosphere reserves. They've never been tilled, they've never been farmed, never been disturbed. And the sounds are different all over the world, just like you'd expect. The world's different everywhere. No forest is the same as any other forest, and no part of a forest is the same as the rest of the forest. And if you do the same probes into Iowa, Nebraska, the big corn, soy farms, that have been using chemical agriculture for decades, which is NPK on the top, which is, bioavailable, the things the plant needs, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And it feeds the plant right on the surface. It's kind of like fast food. You can go a long ways on fast food. Now your body is going to deteriorate, with UPFs, but until ultra-processed foods. But you can eat it and go. You can be an athlete. You can run. You can do things quite a while. Okay, you're going to
pretty
pay,
resilient. Yeah.
You're going to pay for it. By the way, the invoice comes. As you get older.
Yeah.
And it's called our sick care system, our healthcare system, but whatever you want to call it. But the thing is, so underneath that, labile soil, that is basic, the roots go, oh man, we got everything we need, so to speak. We'll go sideways. They don't go down. They have no reason to go down. They do, but they don't.
Right.
They tend to go outwards. And so you don't get that relationship between the living plant and the living soil, because that is a synergetic, that's a symbiotic relationship. And then you stick a probe down there and it's absolutely stone silent. There's not a sound that comes out of these, basically, it's corn and soy, it could be wheat and it could be other things too, safflower, rapeseed, whatever. But nothing's going on down there. There is no life down there. And what I say in the book, and I'm sure a lot of, people will criticize me for saying this, but I say this is the largest organism on Earth. Soil, it's an organism. It's not a medium in which life, worms and things crawl around it, and they do that too, of course. But we have 40 trillion microbes that are crawling around on us, in us as well, and we don't call us, we call us alive.
Right. Soil
is alive. It's an organism, the biggest organism on Earth. And every culture in the world, as far as we know, and about 7,000 call the Earth Mother. Why? Because they know life comes from the mother. And nobody called it Father Earth. No one. So did anybody get it wrong? No.
Right.
They all got it right. We're the same people, and it's the same Earth, and that's our mother. All life comes from Earth, soil, whatever you want to call it, without exception. The exception would be the ocean, but that's not an exception either, because it's coming, to, the relationship,
And that's where most of the drawdown is happening in the ocean, which you get too much of which creates the acidity, and then
but so what what's the way forward? Well, how about taking care of mom? our mother. I mean, she doesn't complain.
No.
She just exists. But the results of that are basically denatured food. And because food is nutrient dense at its best, at its highest, and then when we just feed it just NPK and a few things like that, it'll grow, it'll be green, you can chop it down. You need insecticides because the plant is weaker. Mm-hmm. And insects are going, wow, 3,000 acres, let's go for it. Yeah. We can breed, we can spread, and the same thing, the soil soil dies, essentially. Yeah. And so what happens, we see weeds, what are weeds? Well, actually, weeds are plants that are trying to heal the soil. Mm-hmm. So you can tell the paucity of elements in the soil, or the lack of them, by the weed. In other words, a weed is a sign, just like we have symptoms. Mm-hmm. That is a symptom of the soil. You see Canadian thistle, the problem is that soil has been denatured, and this is missing, and this is missing. So what the weeds do, because they do have taproots in many cases, is trying to revivify, restore the soil. The earth is trying to heal itself. What do we do for that? Glyphosate, right. Roundup. We'll kill the weeds.
Antibiotic for the body. Yeah. Like it's the same. Yeah. Like it's
this parallel. So it's not as though we're screwed. It's the other way around. We're screwing. That's different. Yeah. And so, so much of the narrative right now is, oh my God, we're screwed. And now we have a political system that's even screwing us even more. No, we're screwing ourselves. And the pathways, the knowledge, and the wisdom is there for us to actually regenerate life on Earth, because it's the only, Darin, I mean, you know this better than anybody. It's the only way forward. If you're not creating more life, then, please leave. Because, you're killing this place that your children's children, want to be here, and this amazing, miraculous place we call Earth.
Yeah, it's and everyone can take that to heart, that message, because whatever they're doing, whatever they're working on, whatever they're working towards, pull that string a little farther than just, I'm doing it to make money. I'm doing it to, exist. Like what is that connected to? Mm-hmm. And how can we steward ourselves from the culture we're sitting in to a more regenerative culture in that sense? Because, and you know this as well, we have to work within, it's almost like we have to work with the existing infrastructure. Mm-hmm. We have to work with those people. Mm-hmm. And everyone wants to also demonize the issues. It's that company, they're doing it all. And that's not entirely true either, because there's great people within those corporations or systems wanting to do. So it's this weird kind of thing, but I think what we can do is steward ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like I go back to my brother, like I'm going to grow as many plants and food as I can, and I'm going to start there.
Yeah, and I think the analogy for that would be fire. And big fire down here when I was a lad. I lived in the Sierras, and we didn't have a lot of fire people, but when we had fires, you volunteered, Right. And, we had the boots, the right boots, and that's about it. And so we didn't burn our feet. But when a fire was over, so to speak, then we'd have these, big cloud hopper boots on, and we'd go tamp it down to see if there's any hot spots. Mm-hmm. Like a manzanita can stay glowing ember underneath the ash for a long time, so that it could start a new fire with the wind or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then when it was all tamped down and we're going, everybody's thumbs up, this fire is out. It really is, and so forth. And then, but what are you looking at? Just a big black charred mess. Yeah. Right?
Bunch of carbon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all carbon. Yeah. Yeah. And biologically, though, it looks like a mess. Right. But in the spring, and you're going to see it here from the rains and so forth, you see grasses. You see grasses growing. And I mean, I experienced that. And like they're so green, greener than you ever saw grass in the spring because the ash became a fertilizer. Nutrients, full of nutrients and minerals. And the grass is going fantastic, you know, and it's growing like crazy. But you also see, this is the Oakland Berkeley fire years ago, you know, I mean, what is it, 30 years ago? But just a huge fire, destroyed 300 homes and everything. But it was so close to the University of California and Department of Botany that they were all over it, looking at what was coming up in the spring after that fire. And they were seeing plants, wildflowers, that hadn't been seen for a century.
Yeah.
Well, why not? Well, because it takes, these seeds didn't break open unless there was under heat. So as they had developed over thousands and 10,000s of years, that was their ecology, you know. And what do? Well, they restore the soil. I mean, that's what they're doing, is they're planting themselves and so forth. And yes, they have flowers, which are beautiful, and we love the color and all that sort of stuff, but also they're being pollinated and they're reproducing and so forth. So this is a part of the restoration and renewal of the land, regeneration of the land. And that's what's happening right now, is that this world's on fire, no question about it. But at the same time, as opposed to being, well, the fire's out now, what are we going to do? Underneath that, in my opinion, in my observation, there's thousands of groups around the world, communities, farmers, and cultures that are actively restoring life on Earth. You don't have to use the word regeneration. That's not the point. The question is, what are they doing? And they're creating new life for their culture, their place, their community, for their children, for their families, for, and also just to have a sense of meaning in their life.
Yeah.
Because what's probably the biggest deficit in the world today is purpose and meaning.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't have that,
what do you have?
What's driving you?
Yeah.
Because life is going to happen. Like you're going to get hit with stuff. And kind of going back to like when I lost my property, and I'm surrounded by the national park, so it's wild, right? I've got an ancient oak grove, and it was decimated. To your point, as far as you could see, it was white and black ash, right? 3 weeks later, I came back on the property, and there was still things burning. Like, to your point, holy shit, how is that possible? But then in the observing, because I got back to the land as quickly as I could, bring my dogs back, build a structure, and it was that moment I saw green pop up through the black. And Paul, the celebration that was going on in my soul, I literally ran to these trees and touched them and thanked them, and I was like, if you can do it, I can do it. And the weird thing, so I had only been there since 16, so this is now 18, and the entire hillside was purple flowers, and I asked all these people. My neighbor was there for 25 years. She goes, I've never seen that flower before.
Yeah.
And then these other yellow Jerusalem, I think they're a Jerusalem sunflower, they're called, or Mexican sunflower. The entire other hillside was these flowers, and now they're gone. Like, to that point, like, it's like if you leave it alone, in a sense, it knows exactly what to do, and it's mind-blowing, actually, what happens in the cycle. And I always go back to, like, look at Chernobyl, for God's sakes. There's plants exploding through concrete of old apartments and no one can live there. But life is exploding in a horrible situation. And it's like, if you don't think that is infinitely more powerful and intelligent than we are, then you are not even remotely in your body.
Yeah, you didn't get a hall pass.
Yeah, the elevator stopped short of that. Yeah, so it's like this. It's like this. Leave it alone, but also with the wisdom of the elders, of the indigenous people, the wisdom that they have carried with them, I also saw this in the Incas through Peru. They would, Ollantaytambo, you ever been there?
No, I haven't.
So it was an Incan empire, and this historian was telling me, he'd point up to that mountain, and that's where they stored the tubers because of the shading and the light. And over on that mountain over there, that's where they stored whatever else they had. And they had 7 years of food for everyone in that village. And the water flowed through the village in certain ways. So if you don't think that the knowledge was there, to your point, there would be none of us if they weren't following, listening, being guided by this intelligence.
Right.
And then we come along and hit, bash, take, kill, and we're still doing the same shit.
Yeah.
It's just now we're destroying something we don't know anything about, the soil, people, and it's a frustrating thing. Yes, we're sitting in the reward of conveniences, right? But at the soul level, it's like we know we're not going in the right direction, and when you start describing the fungal kingdom and the plant life and the animal life and the communication, and you're describing that, like, I just want to see that as a movie, like the most extraordinary movie of this planet. It just brings me to absolute awe. Absolute awe. And I think that's what I feel like you're trying to communicate. You're going, the complexity, here's what I know. Here's a bit of the complexity of what we know.
Right.
And it's like, wake up to that. Because that is it.
Yeah.
That's life. And that's why it's like, God, you just want to shake people. You want to take their suit off, throw them in the jungle, and go like, just put your damn feet on the ground and just sit your ass down and take this in. And then maybe go back to your job and reorient yourself a little bit. It's like, and I loved your description of even the fungal kingdom. They eat rocks, they eat soil, they transmute all this stuff, and then they also can alter your brain. Like, it's just an incredible system that we have. And we're just sprinting towards this destructive and continuing this destructive behavior.
Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I mean, of course, greed. Of course, now you've implanted in my head, but I think the programming, there's a lot of programming that has almost created a disconnection, and it continues. Mm-hmm. It's over there, you're here. So I don't know what the point would be. I don't know what the point would be, because it literally in all directions is destructive, and it's destructive to us. Mm-hmm. You know how many times I laugh when people say, take your shoes off, put your feet on the ground. It's biohacking. Check out, get some sun. It helps your circadian rhythm. It's a weird, I'm not necessarily bashing on it. I'm bashing on the context of it. But it's in a weird way. It's going to improve your sleep and your testosterone. Mm-hmm. You're like, yeah, but it's a lot more complex than that. It is a weird way of almost trying to point us back to some sort of union again that what do you think the point would be for almost like a spiritual question or a spiritual evolutionary question of like, what would be the point if we take a million, mile view? what would be the point of our total disconnection of the natural world and this experiment that we're on, to now you and I speaking, because on our deepest level we know that this is not an ideal way to live,
Well, it's not sustainable.
and it's not sustainable, and it's killing people, you know, and people are not happy, and all of the things. What would be the evolutionarily, spiritually aware reason that we would need to go completely asleep? And maybe is it to awaken, to have an experience of a reawakening?
I think that
I don't know.
I mean, I think that the discovery of coal, oil, and gas, you know, in that sequence. I mean, coal is known for 3,000 years in China, so I mean, people used to dig tar and stuff out of the ground and heat things with it. I mean, but the discovery of coal and in a more pronounced way, you know, in the UK and then Europe and the United States, and then oil, 1859, whenever that was, also had been seeping out of the ground for a long time, you know, in different countries, but not, so it had been quote, quote, discovered, but not in the sense of under pressure, you know, where you could actually, it'd pump itself out, you know, just had to put the pipes and things together and then, you know, it burned. And so the discovery of concentrated energy, and what Nate Higgins calls the carbon pulse. Yeah. It's just if you step back in terms of time, we've never on Earth had a moment when the amount of energy that was bioavailable, in this case to us, by the way, to a species, just exploded and grew at such a rapid rate. So the more energy you have, I mean, the more fossil fuel slaves you have, or servants or whatever, you know, and each one of us has 100 at least people working for us every day. I mean, a family of four that's, you know, not, you know, rich, but, you know, more than just middle class, you know, is burning, don't cringe, but it's meant to be cringeworthy, burns a bottlenose dolphin every day and a half for energy. Because that energy you're burning was life. It was marine organisms, you know, it was forest, it was swamps, swamp forests. You know, that's what you're burning, or it's being burnt on your behalf. You're getting electricity, you know, you're charging your car, whatever. But when you get it down to something like, would you want your lifestyle if you knew that, you know, a 300-pound bottlenose dolphin was being consumed and burnt every day or two? No. So we're so far removed from source, you know, when you say, well, they're dead, they are fossilized, they're ossified, we're just doing this stuff there, but we have no appreciation for how much energy that is available to us. And then the culture and the civilization, you know, the traffic in LA, you know, it's like the cars, you know, the type of cars, you know, type of homes, everything, I mean, are based on just this abundance, and then we're acting it out. And it created so much more of everything that human beings want and don't need in some cases, but want anyway. And so it's created behavior, you know, and it's the behavior of the species. And we know so much more now. But I would say, to your point, that again, if you look at the climate narrative, you know, that emerged 30, 40, 50 years ago, really started with Bill McKibben's book, End of Nature, in the 80s, and Al Gore, and, you know, like 5 years later, was it, you know, and then many other books and scientists and expositions of, you know, what was going on and what would happen if we did not address it. That whole narrative has been about fear, about less, about, you know, threat, future existential threat was certainly a common phrase being bandied about. And the verbs and the adjectives that were used were all the things that people do not move towards.
That was where they got it really wrong.
Really wrong. And so nobody talked about possibility. Nobody talked about more. It's hard to understand that actually less now is more and more is less.
Yeah.
More of what we have right now is a lot less.
Yeah.
And, and we're just drawing down the savings account and and spending it wildly, as if there was going to always be more behind that. And there's not. And when I say less is more, which is if you start to pare back and look at activity, economic activity, cultural activity, in a way that actually creates more life, that is more for everybody. Like food that is actually soil that's healthy, that produces healthy food, that feeds people and that are not ending up, in their 40s or 50s and 60s with, 13,000 different diseases that have been identified, and are looking at advertisements for pharmaceuticals that have more side effects, than you have friends. I mean, that's what we're seeing when we look at CNN or something like that, which is like, I've never heard of that disease. Oh, I've never heard of that one either. Yeah. Wow, side effect, death, like seizure.
Like, that's not.
This is like we're making people healthy. No, we're not.
Right.
We're actually, creating a very, very wealthy sick care system. Yeah. That actually benefits hugely from what's upstream, which is crap, food, advertising, ultra-processed foods, denatured food, even natural foods. The amount of vitamins and minerals and nutrients have been just wiped out in terms of what they used to be. They're there, but not in the way they used to be. And so we have a choice to make, but we can't make that choice unless we have a better narrative. Because no one's going to choose to cut off their blood supply, if you will, of what they think is feeding them, making them secure, financially secure, and so forth. That's a hard bridge to cross, no question about it, and so forth. But people are doing it. Yeah. And I just feel like as the world worsens, politically, socially, financially, ecologically, in terms of personal health, etc., because all those things are happening. The concentration of wealth is not making you richer; it's actually making you poorer. Yeah. As that happens, I think one by one, or whatever, people step back and go, I am not actually benefiting from this system. But I have a friend, your brother, whatever. I have a friend somewhere who's doing it this way, or I have a community that, boy, these people seem really, they have purpose and they're doing something and they're making a difference and they seem like it's when we were kids in playgrounds, who do we play with? The guys who are hitting each other with Tonka trucks or the people who are having fun and laughing? We went to the people who are having fun and laughing. It's the same right now, which is that I think humanity is digging a bigger and bigger hole and people are going to peer over the hole and go, I don't like those people down there. I don't like the way they're living. I don't like the way they're talking. I don't like the way they're dividing us. I don't like the way their racism. I don't like the way they talk about gender, about women, about this, about that, and so forth. I'm going over here. These people seem different. Yeah. And so I don't know any other vector of change than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the one hand, nothing is more powerful than getting punched in the face with it happening to you, right? And we see that just down the road with a bunch of people that I'm conveniently living in my home and in Palisades or Malibu, whatever, and all of a sudden now I have nothing. And I went through that, and you're changed as a result because you realize multiple systems maybe have failed you in order for that state to happen, that event to happen, and then after multiple systems are not there in your best interest, because I went through that. I'm still rebuilding. I'm still going through hoops. So there's unfortunately, we get so conveniently kind of zombied to our life that when it gets shooken up personally, then I hope that people, I don't want destruction to happen to people, but when things happen, I hope that informs their DNA a little differently, and then they enact something different. So, it is a tricky kind of narrative but one thing I think about is maybe from the greed aspect, because on some level I think we're all greedy in a sense. It's kind of hardwired, like, I want to, for my family, I want enough for food. But with nature, you can see the abundance so powerfully in that flow. If I plant a pomegranate seed, one seed, and that tree grows, that tree will have 70 fruits on it. You crack that open, maybe you have 700 seeds.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, that's abundance. Those things will give you life. That's food. Like, just yesterday, I was talking with some of the guys are making some great technology, Chris Patton and the team, and I got one guy, Scott, who he just bought a place up in Washington State. Really excited. He didn't show me around his house. Put me on FaceTime, and you know what he did? What he's most excited about? He brought me outside. So I'm walking through the house with him, and we go outside. He goes, "This is where I'm putting the garden, and here's the trees I'm growing." And like, that's what he was excited about. That's the mentality. That was I thought that was so cool, because I don't give a shit about his house. Like, oh yeah, okay, I'm glad you have a great house. But he immediately goes, no, so it's life.
Yeah.
He was most excited about creating life so that he would have food outside of his door.
Yep.
And those things are powerful. That, if we have faith, Paul, I believe that all people have that in them. So if anything, if we continue to create opportunities for people to have something different, to see something differently, to read your book, to grok this different way of looking at it, then maybe they will then start to take another action. And that's the seeds that we can plant.
The LA fire, I mean, somebody asked me to write an op-ed, and I don't write good op-eds. And I told him that. But anyway, I researched and so forth and tried to. I just can't do it. And books, yeah, but not op-eds. But in my research, I discovered that in 1532, Cabrillo came into what's called, it's Los Angeles now, but San Pedro Harbor. And he called it Smoky Bay. And what he saw was dozens of fires around. But he said in Spanish, they were plumes of smoke. Okay, in other words, they went straight up, which means it was not a windy day.
Right.
And then what they were doing, of course, is getting rid of brush so the grass would grow, so that animals would come and eat the grass. They could kill the animals for food. In other words, they were in a cycle of basically preventing forest fires because they were doing controlled burning, fire ecology. They did it for a reason, for food. And the other foods besides animals grew in those open fields. And so fire was present, but it didn't burn the whole damn place down. Right. And so the LA fire was difficult. I mean, the Santa Ana winds get up to 100 miles an hour, they came through the passes, even higher speeds. Got that, and it didn't take much to light it up. But the fact is that it wasn't the Santa Ana winds and so forth. It was years and years of really not paying attention. And my children live, two of them live in Culver City, and I forget what there's a hill. It's all, it could have burned.
Yeah, for sure.
Except there's goats on it everywhere. It's the only place in LA had goats, and they've been munching the brush.
So they made a natural break.
Absolutely. Wow. The fire couldn't take. I'm not sure it would have or wouldn't have had it not been goats, but the point is, where are those ruminants? Where were those animals for the last 10, 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
You know, in the valley, in the mountain passes, you know, and so forth, where the Santa Anas come from, you know, Nevada and Arizona and down there, you know, they don't come from California, and that's where they originate. But animals are gone. Right. So there was the brush, and then it dried out because, you know, unseasonable heat and no rain, you know, and mixed together, kind of like starting a fire, you know, with a stick.
Yeah.
But I feel like the basic fundamental wisdom is here. You know, we know how to live here. We don't know how to sustain the way we are living, but we do know how to live here.
Yeah.
And can we have that many people in the LA basin? Probably not. No, it's probably not a good idea. But we know so much more than we are practicing. So you saw these, you know, disparate, you know, the county, the state, the city, and the fire departments. And not to say the fire people aren't incredible, but I mean, the bureaucracy, this and that. There was no overriding ecological thing. You know, if you don't want to have this place burn, these are the things we know how to do.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And by the way, next time, let's not build houses that are stick construction of wood with 5 feet setbacks in the palisades, you know, because that guarantees that these things will go down like a row of dominoes, and they did.
And they will again. Like, there's without a question.
They're rebuilding,
Right, and so and I love that you said that, because, you know, again, that is an absolute example of the divorce that we once had the knowledge of California, of living in fire zones.
In the 16th century.
Well,
actually, the indigenous people, the tribes here, knew it far before that.
Sure.
They've been practicing it forever.
But yet we want what we want, Paul. And we want to build our house with what we want, how we want it to look like. We want it wherever we want. We're going to put up formaldehyde-soaked timber in a fire zone. Like, and I even see that from the Woolsey, and people like, I just want to get it done. And they're I'm like going, you're just putting up the same thing. It's going to burn. Like,
it'll burn again.
Like what? And it also just quickly reminds me of we got to go in Australia, and we were with the Aboriginals and had the equipment on, and we were cold burning.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like they knew exactly
how
to do it
and when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was all of those things. They didn't just do it when they felt like it. It was like they knew, and then they would let the fire department know this is what we're doing. They're like, okay, yeah, this is a good time, and then for that reason, we live in this zone. We understand this from 60,000 years, and then I'm sitting in my property, and I'm like going, we got to do something, because I'm by myself in this, you know. But, you know, how do you get over?
I mean,
this bureaucratic.
It's been raining here. There should be 1,000 people out there with fire sticks right now.
That's true. It's true.
Like,
it's perfect time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start mine.
You have to get permission from the Forest Service.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Forest Service is doing that finally. Instead of
Are they?
Smokey the Bear, you know, got his retirement. He's in a rest home somewhere. And so the fire, you know, the department, I mean, they know now, you know, that the Forest Service, that you need to burn.
Yeah.
If you don't burn it, something else will.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, thank you.
Yeah.
For everything. I feel like we can talk forever, and there's so much to catch up on. And I really, really love this book.
Thank you.
And I love the carbon-based clarity that you created around it, and the extraordinary description of this planet, really, and how precious this is. And this is abundance. This is good. This is life-giving. And I love, that's the new approach. It's not try to do something doing the same things. It's like, let's produce life.
I wrote the book because I think we've all had the experience in our life, childhood or adulthood, where we've met somebody who just really made a big impact. And they did that because of their warmth, because of their resonance, because of their knowledge, because of their wisdom, because of their kindness, because of the quality they express as a human being. And we go, oh, wow. And that actually changed us.
Yeah.
Changed, even if we went wayward and this and that, we never forgot that person, and we never forgot the teaching of being in the presence of that person. Okay? And when I wrote the book is to say, we have that person here. It's called the planet, the earth, the living earth. And it may not have any impact on you, but when you actually realize how extraordinary life is in all its mystery and complexity, then when you see that, you see yourself differently. Yeah. And that is the nexus of change.
Who was one of those people for you?
Oh gosh, David Brower, who was the founder of the modern Sierra Club. John Muir was the founder. But David Brower, with all those books, he published in Italy about... and when I first met him, I thought he was an arrogant son of a bitch. And it was like 10. And he was I looking at this tall guy, in Yosemite. But I got to know him, as he got older, and the resolute quality and his absolutely just steadfast understanding and I guess not adherence, but devotion to the living world, uncompromising. And sometimes I got him in trouble, but that quality, of like truth-telling and knowing what the truth is, and then that is what your life is about, Yeah, that's what it's about. And so he made a very big impression on me and so forth. But there was others, there's a Zen priest in Japan, and hardly said a word, so it was the opposite. I remember once...
It's just his presence.
Yeah, well, he was introduced to him, and he was like, I'm this gaijin, 20, I don't know how old I was, and kid from America, Zen Buddhism. And he looked like a classic, really... what we'd see from the casting office, in terms of the Zen priest, the beard and everything. I mean, the robe, the face, beautiful, beautiful face, and he sort of, looked at me, and my Japanese wasn't very good then, and he told my friend who introduced me, he said, "Have him ring the bell." And the bell is huge, I mean, it's like a huge bell. And to ring it, there's a big log suspended over there. And the log is so heavy, you can't just ring it. You have to get it going, like back and forth. And then, boom, and you ring the bell. And he listened to it. And he said, okay. And when we were driving back, I said, what was the bell about? He said, he found out who you were.
Wow.
From the bell, he said, Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was your sound.
Huh?
That was your sound.
That was your sound,
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, there's amazing human beings on this planet right now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
One of mine was sitting around a fire, about ready to do an anipi ceremony. I'd been doing hundreds of them, and all of a sudden this guy shows up. Wallace Black Elk, from the descendant of Black Elk, and he was 80. And he was just, as soon as he opened his mouth, he was just like, and he talked science, chemistry, mathematics, and then he brought us into the lodge, and then he just started describing what everything meant. And I remember this one face, he goes, I don't understand why kids are walking around with brains on their backs. And I was like, what? He meant backpacks of books on their backs. He goes, when everything I've learned is from here.
Wow, yeah.
I was like,
right.
whoa.
Yeah.
And then we did a ceremony with the guy, and it was lasting impression.
I really feel all our teachers are here.
Yeah,
They're not like absent. They didn't leave. They're here.
totally.
And you just have to want to be taught.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have to be.
I don't come off, I know I'm writing a book. I know you don't listen up. That's not my MO.
Right.
I mean, I'm learning. I'm curious. I'm astounded. I am ignorant. No, I am. I am, you know. And I feel like even though I'm getting older, I'm a newbie. And both ways, you know, is true. But like Robin Wall Kimmerer right now, you know, I mean, in the Western tradition, we say she's a goddess. In the Native American, she's a teacher. She is a wisdom holder, and just her voice, her sound, the way she constructs her sentences, her words, the way she speaks to others, it's an entire teaching.
Yeah, there's some
How to
great,
be a human being. Yeah.
there's some great people. Well, you're one of them, man.
You're one. I was gonna say the same to you. I was gonna say. I mean, I'm not trying to be fawning and praise, but I'm saying, I look to you. I listen to you. I read you, and so, thank you for all you do. I really, really, really am grateful. The fact that you're here helps me, even if we never met again and talked again. The fact that your very presence is here, I mean, I go into despair just like anybody else is what's going on in the world. I don't have some shield or some, I don't. I mean, maybe daily sometimes, just like, you know, it hurts.
Yeah.
There's grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But having, people like you, I've referenced you so many times in conversation, that gives us strength. Knowing that there's people doing work like this, like what you're doing, it helps me every day. Thank you.
Thank you, man.